welcome to Your Band Sucks at Business, a podcast on the business of running a band. I'm your host, Marcus Manhez, and I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Malcolm Owenflood. Malcolm, how you doing?
Great. Stoked to be here.
So, I know we say this every time that we have a guest, but this is a really special episode for me, and I think you too. You know, this is a really important one for us. And our guest today has worked with artists including Gallant, Joji, Demi Lovato, Role Model, Kesha, countless others. He was nominated for a Grammy in 2017 for his work on Gallant's Ology. Please welcome to the show, producer and songwriter Stint. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, this is a cool one, man. When Malcolm told me that you reached out and were interested in doing an episode, it was a pretty cool one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I DM'd you guys. I'm lucky to be on here. This is great.
It is so awesome when that happens. There was one other, recently we did an episode with a guy named Jesse Cannon, who I look up to a lot in the industry. And when I reached out to him, he was like, "Oh yeah, I listened to your podcast." And I was like, "Yes."
It's so dope. I mean, to get it out of the way, like I just so appreciate what you guys are doing. Cause I think, coming from Victoria myself, I kind of just really fumbled my way through my career, not really understanding how anything worked. And I would just like learn as I went and kind of fuck up along the way and make mistakes. And it's not like, you know, you can prevent that entirely, but to have like a resource like you guys would have been amazing for me coming up. Just like anyone talking openly about kind of how all the other stuff besides the actual music works. I think it's so valuable, and the fact that you guys are doing it like, or at least partly in my hometown, like it was too kind of perfect to not reach out and just say I appreciate what you guys are doing.
I feel like that's kind of where it stemmed from too for us, right? Like we fumbled our way through our, you know, our band Rascals. We fumbled our way through because we had no idea what we were doing. And when we first started, like 2014 kind of era, there wasn't a lot of, you know, there weren't a lot of resources available. Like YouTube now, there's tons of channels and stuff with lots of information on Spotify and whatever. But I mean, then we kind of just followed local bands who were doing well, and we kind of just did what we thought would work, but we definitely fucked up and we didn't really know what to do. So yeah, that's kind of where it stemmed from. I think it's just nice for us to, if we can help anybody, you know, like it feels good. And I think it's kind of like our duty because we've made those mistakes. If we can make other people avoid them, then that's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, I've got probably like almost 10 years on you guys. I feel like I was getting out of high school around 2004 and like already in a high school band. And we like, I didn't even go to university right away. We just toured. We like got straight on the road and like, and that's a subject we can get into to, you know, share my opinions on that whole thing. But yeah, it can easily feel very kind of like your resources and the information out there can feel really limiting. I feel like even now, even though YouTube's, I'm sure, doing amazing things, podcasts are doing amazing things to like, you know, just openly talk about things. But back when I was coming up, it was like nothing. Like I didn't know how anything worked, and all I knew was the local scene, and just like, okay, well, you know, this band's doing this band's doing that, so what's the little niche we can find, and then like let's just, I don't know, play at Lucky Bar and just give it our best, you know what I mean?
Lucky Bar, oh yeah.
By the way, listeners, we're going to refer to Stint as Jay, which is what he goes by.
That's my real name. Yeah, not to be confused.
So Jay, we were thinking that maybe we could go right back to the beginning with you and kind of get a roadmap from when you were in Victoria doing the local band circuit to where you are now, because obviously that is a huge amount of change has gone on in there, and there's probably a lot of moments where things changed very dramatically for you, and your understanding of your industry would have just transformed as those changes happened, I'm sure, as well. So just by virtue of going through your life, I think we're going to learn a ton. Were you born in Victoria?
Yeah, I was born and raised. Yeah, I lived near, and my parents are still near Cedar Hill Crossroad and Blenkinsop. This is probably getting too nerdy for anyone listening outside the city. But yeah, went to Brayfoot Elementary, Cedar Hill Junior High, and then Victoria High School. Man, I mean, I could give like a crazy abridged version, or I could just kind of go into it. But I feel like you guys should interrupt me whenever you have any questions, because I'll just fucking rant forever if you let me.
Maybe I'll cue you up. Were you like, at what point were you like, okay, I'm pursuing music?
Yeah. Okay. So, my close friends and I all were super into comics growing up, and we were like, we're going to be comic book artists. Like, no question. We were drawing our own comics and like stapling them together. And then one birthday, one of my friends got a guitar, and then he just started noodling. And then his brother got gifted a drum set. And I had music in my family, but I never and I was connecting with music at the time. Like I was really excited by like new bands, and like somewhat embarrassingly, like the big movement of my era was like nu metal. So like I heard Korn, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like I'd never heard anything like that.
Korn is still great. I'm just saying it. They're still awesome.
Korn, yeah, we don't need to get on that tip, but I still got a mad respect for Korn. They broke down a lot of barriers. Anyway, yeah, so we just started playing Rage Against the Machine and Tool covers, for fun. And then that quickly took over the comic book artist dream as like the thing to do. So, it was literally just, we were already friends, and we just kind of assigned ourselves instruments. And like I said, I had music in my family. So like my mom's a piano teacher. So I was kind of around music in that sense. My brother had drummed in bands before, but he's a lot older than me. So yeah, it just kind of took off from then, or from there. And by the end of high school, we were like dead serious. And like I was telling you guys earlier, like I toured like right out of, as soon as we graduated high school. We did like a cross Canada thing for like 2 months. And then it was like a series of, from that point, like, doing the tours that you pretty much self-fund, you make no money, you play to no one, unless you get super lucky on the odd gig, and then you go home and you lie to your, Mick job that you're going to stay there forever, fully knowing that you're there for 3 months until you can afford to go back on the road again. So I did that. I did that for a while, about a year and a half. And then I got a little insecure. I went to university for a year out east, did well, but like realized music definitely was it. Came back, did another band for a few years. That one, seemed to feel, these are all tiny bands by any, stretch, but that one kind of like felt like it got me to the next echelon. Like, okay, we're not just playing all ages shows. We're like getting, some label offers. We're getting booking agents. We're, getting into the mix in the Canadian, like actual industry. So I do that. And then that one falls apart, just, I don't know, for whatever reason. And I kind of, at that point, am a little frustrated. This is probably closer to 2009, 2010. And I get a little frustrated and kind of like felt like I was relying on other people for my own success. And I kind of like, I guess I have a bit of a control freak in me, but I also just didn't like leaving that much up to chance. Like, oh, I hope the other 3 or 4 guys I'm in the band with are going to pull their weight as much as I am, or, care as much as I do, which isn't even fair for me to expect. So I was like, what can I do with my skill set to at least be able to have some kind of a job that pays something on my own? And I settled on like sound design for film and television. So I went to Vancouver Film School for a year. And that's where I learned how to do everything, in the computer world of music. Like we were trained on Pro Tools, like synthesis, like anything like recording dialogue, mixing, Foley, basically, ironically, everything besides music in audio, in pro audio. But it taught me what an EQ does and what a compressor does. And I got a real fast education.
What year were you at Van Film School?
I think that was just a tiny bit of 2009, but most of 2010.
Okay, cool. I'm just trying to get an idea of that. So keep on going.
Yeah, if you need a timeline. Yeah, so that changed a lot, because all of a sudden, I have an employable skill, and my whole goal was to work in gaming industry. I really love video games like my whole life, and that area seemed a little bit more exciting and challenging and different than just putting sound to a linear picture, because you're like creating reverbs that'll react live in these 3D spaces to your, the sounds that you already plugged in. So you kind of are like running these live plugins like a giant session. It just seemed super interesting to me. And
it's totally fascinating. It's like utterly responsive to anything the player does.
Yeah.
It's got to be the hardest gig in the music production realm.
Well, musically, for sure, there's like non-linear music is like a huge thing that was a big movement around that time anyway. I remember this is like super niche, but there was a Splinter Cell game called Chaos Theory where Amon Tobin did the soundtrack, and I loved Amon Tobin. And it was like the first thing that smacked me in the face of non-linear music, where it would change depending on the drama of the situation you were in. So he had created like this composition with like effectively, 5 different layers of intensity that would all be running simultaneously, and then it would kind of like mix into, at the appropriate bar line. Like if something crazy was happening, the music would get crazier, and if it calmed down, it would calm down like real time. I love that stuff. That's so fascinating to me. But then I didn't get a job in gaming. Then I fell right back into music. But this time, kind of on the production side, I had started noodling with a friend of mine, Amy, and we started a like electronic duo that lasted a couple years. And simultaneously, I had been asked by some people from the school to help out with the soundtrack for this mountain biking movie of all things. And it sounds silly still talking about it, but it was a really cool experience. And for whatever reason, everything just kind of clicked. And within the mountain biking community, this was like, unbeknownst to me at the time, it was like this landmark film. It was like shot like with like planet Earth, level quality digital cameras, and was just this like beautiful piece. It was like, I don't know, 50 minutes or whatever, but they toured it, and it got a lot of exposure for me, at least as a producer. That was like one of the first things that kind of, pulled attention my way. And like for the longest time, I mean, there's so many random factoids. I've had such a bumpy journey. I'm glossing over so much, but for like a real fun fact is like, because of that film alone, for the subsequent like 3 or 4 years until I just ended up having to turn them down because I was doing too much pop music production, I was paying the bills by like doing these random odd job, like, extreme bike ads or like snowboarder ads or like GoPro ads, like that would just come to me because, they were all shot in the style of this mountain biking thing, and they wanted like big hype kind of, it was this cinematic and like glitchy kind of hip hop hybrid thing that I was doing. I even did like the theme for the Canucks one year. Like because of it. Yeah, it's just like
that's on
random stuff. But like, it paid the bills, and I was like happy to do it at the time. It was way better than trying to juggle an actual like real life job with music stuff. Because I was learning doing that. I was just, every new song you do, you learn something new. So that was great.
I'm not at all surprised that you broke in through the mountain biking community, because that is like something that is very strong over here. We had success in that market too. There's even like a trail somewhere in what's the town, Marcus?
In Roslyn, BC.
Roslyn, yeah. They named a mountain biking trail after one of our songs.
No way! Yeah. Congrats! Holy crap! Are you guys mountain biking composers too?
Yeah.
This is crazy. This is like this niche West Coast Canadian music niche.
Yeah. Sorry. That's what. Yeah. We had, that was our first sync ever before we even knew what a sync was. Honestly, we got a message from one of our friends who worked in the industry, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I heard the song. We want to use it for this, like an internet ad for mountain biking." And we were like, "Okay, cool." And we grew up kind of riding. We were from the valley, Cowichan Valley, so we mountain biked, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And then it ended up being a huge piece. It was on Pink Bike. It had
Pink Bike
on Pink Bike.
Yeah, I remember Pink Bike. Get the fuck out. This is crazy. I thought I was in some like real niche thing. You guys would be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" That's awesome, you guys.
When you said mountain biking, I was like, no shit. That's how we kind of, and then that ended up snowballing. We ended up getting a Red Bull one too for mountain biking as well, which was really cool. But it's really funny to me that happened for you in mountain biking as well. That's so, because I felt like it was kind of niche.
Yeah, me too. I didn't know anyone else doing it. This is so good. Well, we've cracked the code, boys. We figured out how to have success in the music industry. Just go straight to the mountain.
We're making a course,
industry.
the 3 steps to famous.
Yeah, we're done. We did it. Podcast over.
Hey, what was that mountain biking? What was the movie called that you worked on? That one you were talking about?
It was called Life Cycles.
Oh yeah, I've seen Life Cycle. Okay, there you go.
Whoa,
Great.
there you go. Crazy.
We also there was one before that, Marcus. We got on that Polish one. These people just reached out on Bandcamp and they're like, "How's $100?" We're like, "Yes!"
Yeah.
Exclusive rights to our catalog.
Oh man, you want to know a random one? I have. There's somewhere deep in the recesses of what is it called? Keeping Up with the Kardashians. That history. I had one of those dudes back in like 2008 or 2009 when I was first diddling on Ableton. And he'd like somehow found me and he was like, yeah, man, just give me 50% of the publishing on all these little beats you got and I'll get you in reality TV. And I swear it was probably like $200 or $300, but I remember
so
there's a beat of mine in one of those Keeping Up with the Kardashian episodes, one of the thousands.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So, sorry, we sidetracked you there. And, so 2009, you graduate film school, you go back into the music scene with your electronic duo, and you get this Pink Bike. Pink Bike was us. You got a mountain biking gig.
Sure.
And then became an extreme sports composer, more or less.
Yeah, well, it's not like that was really my main thing. The band was the main thing for about 2.5 years, but it was quite a whirlwind comparatively because like there was a label that had formed that was actually partially based out of like at least an investor out of Victoria, and we were signed to it, and then they had connections down in LA. So that's kind of how I first started dipping my toes in the LA scene. They brought us down. They had hired someone on who used to work at XL Recordings, like doing like MIA's stuff, and he was like, all right, I'll help you build a label. And he was kind of like super cool to us, like, you know, we'll do anything you say kind of thing. And yeah, we did some more high profile tours, but not like, you know, based on our own success. We just got on opening slots, but that gave me some experience doing like bus tours and, you know, playing to bigger crowds, more like 500 to 1,000 cap, nothing crazy. And we did a festival tour. There was like, this was during like the EDM bubble, and like there was a big touring EDM festival that we were like on some god-awful afternoon slot for, but we still just hopped on a bus for about 3 weeks and met a lot of great people. There was just like, I don't know, this cool backstage kind of camaraderie. You know, I didn't sleep for like 3 weeks, and that really fucked me up for sure. Not in like a cool party way, like literally in like, oh, I have insomnia way.
That's funny. It's funny, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, but you're talking about not sleeping. We were the opposite on tour.
Oh, I hate you.
Malcolm slept more on tour than I think I've seen anybody sleep in my life. It's insane.
Yeah, I'd come back healthier with like rosier cheeks, caught up on sleep.
I hate you. My best friend and like, you know, the original singer to my original band, he's like that. He can knock himself out on command anywhere. He would just like sit up straight, you know, close his eyes and just start snoring in like 5 seconds. Yeah, you guys are built for touring. I think you're doing the right thing if you're on the road then, because anyone that can do that, I feel like should do that.
We just had the RV, and that just made all the difference.
Yeah, that helps a lot for sure.
Just having a place to sleep and like the ability to not be like smushed right beside somebody in a car seat kind of thing. It's like, it was
right,
very helpful.
The car seat one is brutal. And pro tip for bus tours, that first tour was me on the bottom bunk. I realized that tour, like, no one wants the bottom bunk. And all the subsequent tours I fought for middle or top, and that was a way easier situation. But anyway, I did that, and it was like I said, kind of like a big kind of jump again for what I was used to in terms of like success. Like, oh, we were making a bit of money. There were label advances. You know, we're kind of like at a little bit of a different echelon in the industry. And then when that fell apart, I almost immediately jumped straight into production. I kind of knew I was getting into production before the band even officially quit. I had, you know, met a couple other artists down in LA, and I was like already talking about, you know, doing projects with them. And what I told myself is, because I was still based in Vancouver at the time, for that band, I'd moved over to Vancouver, or I guess for the school, right? So since I went to VFS, I had been based in Vancouver rather than Victoria. And yeah, when I wanted to kind of try my hand at production, I said I would go down to LA for a month and just see how it went. And, you know, knowing that I kind of like had this one artist I wanted to work with who was, you know, getting exec produced by a much bigger producer and kind of like in the mix in the writing scene here. And he was bringing me into tons of sessions, super sweet guy. And just a lot of things just kind of went right randomly. I ended up in a really sweet house that I literally just posted on Facebook, like, hey, does anyone have any place I can sublet for a month? And a friend that I knew, you know, I had met once or twice, like literally through touring, he was like, oh yeah, I got a buddy. And it was like this crazy house. It was like, it wasn't, so it was Samantha Ronson's old house, and Lindsay Lohan used to live next door. And crazy story, if you guys have seen the Nixium documentary, I don't know if you've heard of this thing.
Yeah.
We were next door to them in Venice.
Oh, when it was happening?
While it was happening. And like I moved in, and then my, like the guy that owned the house, he's this other dude that's like my age and really chill. Just came into money like really early on, and he's a drummer, so he put a studio in the house, so it had everything I needed. And he was like, oh, by the way, there's a cult next door. I was like, cool, okay. I guess that's just LA.
Sweet.
You know, you got floofy religions starting here all over the place. I didn't really take it too seriously. And then, yeah, all this shit came out after. I was like, holy shit. So anyway, yeah, I gave myself a month, and I was just like, we'll just see what happens. And I got in with this bigger writer, Rick Knowles, through this artist that I was working with. And he was working on, like, he's famous. Like, he's been doing stuff since the 80s and like has had hits all throughout the 90s and 80s, and his big kind of claim to fame in the aughts was Lana Del Rey. So I was immediately working on some of her new stuff, and we did this like demo with Adele. He's like, oh yeah, I showed Adele one of your beats and she got on it. And I was like, oh wow, LA is great. Like you can just make it in the music industry. No, it's super easy. And of course, like I think one Lana thing came out of like 8 that I worked on, and the Adele one never came out. But still, it kind of definitely, you know, proved like, okay, I can get into the scene here. It's not like some impenetrable barrier. So a little spark, I was like, all right, can this sublet turn into an indefinite rental situation? And, you know, the house is great. So the guy was like, yeah, of course. And I, at the time, had been dating a girl for a while, like a few years, and we agreed to kind of move in the second I started coming down to LA. So for the next, I don't know how many, 4 years, I was doing a back and forth thing where I would have a place with my girl in Vancouver and then have this place down in LA. And I'd basically do a month down and then a week up. And the week up was just to kind of keep the relationship alive and, you know, see my family and friends again, and keep in whatever small pockets of the Vancouver music scene I was still doing stuff in. I mean, honestly, and I just built the career like that. And I think I was kind of lucky in that sense, because I hear of a lot of people kind of having to move from farther away, and it just doesn't logistically make sense either financially or just time-wise to kind of jet back and forth from like London or even Toronto. Like it's just under a 3-hour flight from Vancouver to LA, and you can usually get them for like $250-$300 like round trip. So I was like able to afford it still, and it allowed me to not have to just commit completely fully to this new life and kind of like be like it has to work or I'm screwed. It's like I had a fallback plan if everything went to shit.
Nice that you had like some immediate gratification getting down there and had some wins right away, though. I'm sure that played a big role in like your decision making process of like, okay, I gotta keep going with this.
Yeah, it kind of pulled down the veil, so to speak, of like, you know, like LA being this kind of like I always kind of just grew up on American media and Canadian media. That's a whole other weird subject of like, oh, I thought like Matthew Goodband was as big as like, you know, Aerosmith.
Yeah, we're in a bubble.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, I'm not like a big like destiny or fate kind of guy, but it definitely kind of was like a nice like like it was like a spark got lit. I was like, okay, I can make this happen. And, you know, it's just another, I mean, this is a whole subject in itself, but it's just another city. It just happens to be a city where everyone kind of has come to in the last like 5-10 years. But once you're in it, it feels like a local scene, which I didn't think would be the case. Like, you know, I thought everything would be behind closed doors and like, you know, there'd be some like gutter punk local scene, but then all the celebrities are like far away, but it's not really like that. People still live their lives here. And yeah, you just kind of like get in the mix in the same way you get in the mix with other people in your local scene, no matter what city you're in.
Right. That question's been asked to me a few times. Like, should we move to a bigger city, or should we just try and like be the big fish in the small pond? Right. And I think honestly, I believe that moving to the big city is like a smarter decision for most people, even though that's not something that we ended up doing. We just stayed in Cobble Hill on the island, but like, I think for bands you're just going to find more opportunity in a bigger pond, I think.
Yeah, well, it's such an interesting subject. I've thought so much about it. I truly do believe, I mean, Victoria is a bit, and Victoria and Vancouver is a bit of an exception to this rule, but in my head, it's all scalable. Like, I say they're an exception because real estate's so crazy, and you've had like that crazy bubble. Like, cost of living in Vancouver is exceptionally high for how much you can, reasonably make in the music industry there if you're doing what I do, at least. And I think there are exceptions, but I think by and large, if you're in a smaller town and you're making less money than you would, or working on less big things, quote unquote, than you would in a bigger city, your cost of living is also so much smaller that it all kind of scales down, and you can still have this metric of success like within your town. And like, it's all, I think it should be based more on what kind of music you actually want to make, and like follow like your artistic like inclinations. And that's kind of what I feel like I've based my decisions on, at least I hope. It's like, I'm not down here to work on the stuff with the biggest numbers, whatever it may be. I'm down here because there was so much of the music that I was like, oh, I want to be making that, is getting made here. London was also a really big consideration for me because there's just so much cool music coming out of there. Obviously, like, I wanted to stay in an English speaking place and stuff. I wasn't looking globally or whatever, but I just, there's cool stuff coming out of everywhere, but that's a whole other subject, actually. It's like, honestly, since LA is such a hotbed of people like me and writers, it attracts people from other towns too, at least even temporarily. So I've, a lot of my career has been London-based artists or people, based out of different cities coming here, writing their album, and then going off and still being based there, touring or whatever. So it's kind of just become this like airport of musical creativity and talent. Everyone just kind of dips in, does their thing, and gets out.
Yeah, it's like you're in like the songwriter producer's hub, and if you wanted to be the best, like busiest session musician, you might go to Nashville instead, kind of.
Exactly. Or country. If you want to do country, go to Nashville. If you want to do hip hop, like Southern hip hop especially, go to Atlanta. Atlanta's like way more cool than here for hip hop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. So I think maybe could you describe what you actually do for our audience? Because there's a big difference. We were talking about this before we started recording, but like, I'm technically a producer as well. Even I call myself more of a mixer these days because I'm doing less production. When I produce a band, it's like not the same thing as what you do. Like I might listen to a song that's already been written and offer some critiques, kind of things. But like, most of my production decisions is more about how the song's going to translate and hit the audience through speakers.
Wow.
Where in the pop genre and what you do is more like songwriting when in my head. But I would love to hear you talk about what you do, and so our audience kind of understands that. I think most of our audience is actually, I have no idea. We got to do a survey, but like, I think it's going to be half and half at least of our audience being in like the more rock side of things, where they're writing songs as a band or whatever, versus the pop approach.
Right, which is to go on a tangent, it's like combining again. I think pop punk's like taking off in a way that I haven't seen since like the heyday in like early aughts. It's crazy. So there's probably in the next year or so and moving forward, there's going to be a lot more crossover between our worlds for sure. And yeah, I'm so fascinated by what you do too, because I've had an experience being around it, being in bands coming up and doing our records with local producers and stuff. And I totally view that as a completely different job. It's weird that we have the same title.
Yeah.
Because and I'm fascinated by that, and I would love to do that at some point. Yeah, it's really interesting to me. Yeah, what do I do? So, yeah. it's hard to. I feel like my mom asks this every year and still doesn't understand it.
Yeah. What you do most often?
So I mean, it would make more sense back in like when I came up during like the EDM bubble, because everyone was making everything on a laptop. It was like the SoundCloud boom era, Hype Machine. Everyone just was like, you know, bootlegging acapellas and making like I did a bunch of like remixes to kind of start out my production career. But I guess getting started there and in electronic music trained me to like make a whole song from scratch on my own, you know, in my computer, in my laptop. And from there to kind of get into where I'm at now, I've basically just expanded my role into songwriting as well. The way I like to think about it is like, it'd be similar to producing a band if I was also the band. So like, I usually get linked up on a typical day with an artist who's a singer and also a songwriter. There's lots of songwriters that also get added that's their sole job, to just aid in the songwriting. And then we'll all get in a room together and we'll either meet for the first time or we'll already have worked together and know each other. And then we just make a song from scratch that day. And ideally you're left with a pretty listenable demo. So that's everything from like, yeah, obviously, you know, tempo, key, melody, lyrics, chords, you know, groove. And I'm just kind of used to playing every role in the instrument side of things. And then I, you know, cut the vocals too. It's a very kind of DIY approach when you think about it. As I've grown, I've like added more people kind of into, like, I still work quite like solo. I like to kind of keep things modest and small with like how I do things, because I like a really kind of comfortable, you know, inviting setting. I don't want to like invite some artist over and then have like 5 people in the room like, oh, this guy does this and this guy does this and this guy will get your coffee or whatever. It's like I don't like that vibe just for a room. It doesn't feel creative to me. But yeah, that's the easiest way to explain it. We just kind of all get in a room and we write a song. There's a singer, and then there's kind of me who kind of fills in whatever else needs to be there besides the singing.
I have so many questions, but go ahead.
I watched your Noise Lab series there where you broke down Weight in Gold.
Dope.
And so that's an interesting one to me, because you kind of built that song before you really had any, like, you didn't build it with Gallant in mind, right?
No.
And that's interesting. How often are you doing that now versus getting in a room with, say, maybe a loop or something like that, and then writing a song with a singer in the room? Like, do you still come to people with like a full beat and say like, if something hits, like, are you interested in writing on it, or is it more of like a collaborative thing now?
Well, that what you just described is a very kind of hip hop approach. I feel like that's kind of a lot of the people that I know making beats in hip hop are kind of approach it like that, and they just have a giant folder of beats. And then there's other, you know, on the flip side, there's, you know, strictly pop writers who are like, no, let's like talk about it. Let's get chords first and we'll build it up from scratch. And I feel like I fall somewhere in the middle. What I usually try to do is have some loops ready for any session that I'm about to go into. And when I say loops, I just usually find chords on a certain sound or, you know, a certain kind of groove, basically just the most bare bones version of an idea. And I'll usually just rock it through however many in a morning, like before that session. So I'll make sure I kind of have 2 hours free before the session starts. And I'll just like, you know, pop in like 5 or 6 ideas. And that's honestly, you know, I started doing that more so for my own insecurities than for any efficiency, because half the time you don't even use any of those. Half the time you pull up some reference or you just are talking about stuff and then you kind of start something from scratch in the room. But I just, sometimes I've been in situations like early on, and I mean, it still happens from time to time, but I've been in situations where they just, you know, everyone's a little vague on what they want to do and I don't have anything to play. And then it's just very kind of, it's an awkward little hurdle you have to get over to be like, what about these chords? And maybe if you pull up the wrong patch in that moment, then they think you suck, or like, you know, I don't know. I get in my own head about it, but it's nice to have a little bit of, you know, ammo to fall back on just to spark creativity.
It's funny that you brought that up. There's that. Have you ever seen that Oak Felder little clip where he talks about working with Demi Lovato, and he basically talks about before he added the 808, he was just playing some chords and there was a little bit of a groove behind it. And everyone in the room was kind of like, what the fuck is this? Like, this isn't very good. And he added an 808, exact same chords. And everyone was like, oh shit. Like, yeah. It's just like, it's such a funny image in my mind. Like everyone going crazy when the bass hits. Like, it's the same thing. It's just funny when you brought that up, said, if the chords don't hit right, everyone's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah. People are and that's good. Honestly, I prefer people being incredibly reactionary to like whatever's happening in the room, because then I'm a very adaptable kind of producer. Like there are some producers who approach it more like I, as a producer, I do one thing, or I do this one kind of genre and this one type of beat, and I'm so good at it that you're going to come to me and want tracks that sound like that, and that's dope, and I fully respect that and acknowledge that's a total legitimate approach. But part of the reason this job specifically appealed to me so much was that I did get to bunny hop between a bunch of genres that I absolutely love. So I can do like an R&B record, a pop record, I can do like a heavy record, because I genuinely love listening to a bunch of stuff, all over the place. I'm sure as almost everyone does, but that kind of led me to kind of naturally find a pretty adaptable approach where I'm just there to make the artist happy. Like I'm like, what do you want to do? What's like the best version of you that I can help bring out?
Are you involved lyrically as well?
Yeah, from time to time. Because another kind of thing about my career, I guess, is like I've gravitated towards working directly with artists, and there are a lot of, you're talking about me having a beat before I even got in the room with Gallant that time. I do a bit of this, but some people do a lot of it where you are making entire songs with just writers, and then you're like pitching them to artists like as fully written songs. So like, hey, just sing this. And like the Demi Lovato one I did was like that. Like it was going to be a Rihanna thing, and then it was a Demi Lovato thing. Like you kind of get, if a song feels good to X, Y, and Z person in the industry and it gets passed around, ideally you're getting it synced. I just had one come out like that a couple weeks ago. So I still do a bit of that, but wait, I forgot what my point was.
Well, okay, now I've forgotten too, because I'm really interested in what you just said. Did you call that, when Demi chose that song and more or less bought it, I guess, did you call that a sync?
Did I call it a sync? No, I call it sync when it pitches, or when it lands with like a commercial or
yeah, definitely. Okay, same here. So what do you consider that? Did you like sell the song to them, or
before it actually gets released, you call them pitch records.
Okay,
that's what my publisher calls them and how you talk about it. So like, if you get in the song in the room with a songwriter and you make a record to be pitched, then you call it a pitch record. And then once it lands, it just becomes, I don't know, a real record.
It's a record.
This is like the most foreign thing I've ever even like thought about in my brain. Because like I just can't imagine, like, first of all, a band coming to record with me and I don't already know the song we're working on. Just I can't picture that. And then if they showed up and we're like, all right, let's write a song, I'd be like, oh fuck, we need more time.
It's such a rock mentality, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Because think about the hours that as a band that you spend in a room with your bandmates writing songs, right? Like, it's not like you just write when it kind of comes to you for the most part, and that's how I think a lot of bands do it. You're not sitting down being like, okay, we're gonna knock out 5 songs this week or something like that. You kind of jam it out. It's definitely a different approach. It's interesting.
So as a band, have you guys ever worked with outside writers?
No, but our last producer definitely got very involved in our like structures and stuff like that and arrangements. So we were sending him demos and he was like, all right, circle the chorus, that sucks. Send something better. And we had to go back and write and send him a new thing. And then he'd be like, okay, that's great now, but your bridge is just not working anymore. You got to rewrite that. So we did that like kind of over email. But yeah, like for producing in rock, it's more like I'm producing the instrumental, like the individual musicians to get the best out of them and stuff. And like,
like a performance thing, right? You're coaching.
Yeah, performance, and maybe altering their parts a little bit and stuff like that. Being like, okay, bassist, clean that up. Nobody wants to hear what you're doing there. Sync to the kick or whatever, stuff like that.
Right.
In much more constructive words. But like it's mostly that and like that arrangement stuff, But more or less, like I listen to a like Dropbox folder full of songs, and I'm like, okay, this song has bones. We're going to work on this one kind of thing. So it's so different. This is totally fascinating.
Yeah, I do a bit of that, but truthfully, for me, as a business model, it actually is I have to be offered a very nice production fee to consider doing that, because I've found, how long have I had this career now? Like, almost like 8 years. Like if I started producing in 2013, coming up on that, the publishing has been like the closest thing I can imagine that will work as like a retirement plan for me. Like the way that money's kind of come in is really fascinating to me. When I first started out in this career, I was like, what's the biggest fee we can get? What's the biggest fee we can get? Let's get producer's fee. Like what can I have? Because it was money, it was cash in hand. I was like, oh my God, great. Big fee. Awesome. But I wasn't considering, okay, what's the actual quality of the song in terms of like how do I see the longevity working with this? Like, do I think this is truly a good enough piece of work and songwriting to like have a long life and get some, whatever, streams, sync opportunities or whatever? And B, obviously, do I have any publishing on it? And if I don't, then the income stream is actually thinking for like 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, is significantly less. Like that fee, if I have anything close to a hit, like I haven't had like a hit yet, but even with the minor stuff I've had, if you wait over 5 years, the money, like the more successful songs I've had generates and, dwarfs the producer fee, any producer fee I've ever gotten, no matter how high. Like it's a much less sexy, but like more long-term plan.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, in the way you're working, it's like it's not a question of if you deserve those points. It's like you're literally creating the thing that the points are based on.
Right, which actually was what we were talking about when I forgot what we were talking about, was writing lyrics. And yes, I do have a hand, and I'm definitely not the type to like, write a full lyrical verse for someone and like be like, what do you think of this? I'm more like, in a similar way that you coaching performances from musicians, I'll coach kind of lyrics out of artists. So I'll be like, maybe this line could be stronger, or what if it connected like this? And I'll throw out ideas. Obviously, songwriters can do that way faster and better than I can. But I've kind of, a lot of my career has been based around me working directly with artists, because I found that was just an easier way to get results. Like, and I don't mean results in terms of songs, I mean results in terms of stuff actually coming out. Because if I'm there with them in the room, I can tell their excitement level, and if they're really excited about a song and feeling it, and we can follow that path, it feels way less like just shooting in the dark, hoping to get a good pitch record that'll land with someone big. It's kind of like, you can view them in two different ways. It's like the pitch records are like the higher stakes gambling version of it. Even the best writers can do something like 30 songs, which is like working every day, like a month of your time, and one of them will land. And that'll probably go with a bigger artist, and it'll probably stream pretty well, because there's not a lot of like developing or smaller artists that are taking pitch records. But for me, it was kind of like a more secure and like, like much like less chance that stuff will blow up crazy, but also more chance that I'll just have more songs go through. So I've kind of had this discography that's a little bit more like I'm not afraid of like album tracks. Everyone seems to want like singles down here, but I'm like, no, I want like the whole album. I want to like, creatively, that's more fun for me. And it's just, it's just a bulk. That sounds horrible. Right. I don't want to think of it like that.
Right.
But.
Quick aside here, just for like the rock people listening, they should be aware that there are songwriters in that genre as well. And if you're like feeling like what Jay is talking about is like a workflow that appeals to you, you should totally look into that. I think rock people should work with songwriters way more often. And there's also producers like myself who get more involved on that level. It's kind of like a business model decision, like how much time do you want to commit to something like that, and if it's in your skill set. So you could always look for a producer that fills those shoes if you wanted that as well, or partner up with a specific songwriter. It's definitely an option.
I think it's really healthy. You should like try it, even if just to know if it's for you or not. Like, I think you can, if you're open to it. Like one of the few, like I've only done a few rock records. I did like some Portugal the Man stuff back on their last album, and But the one I'm like super stoked on is this band Health. I did like they're this LA like noise, you know, I don't know if you can call them metal. They're very bizarre, but I love them, and I was a fan for years before I got to work with them. But one of the first song on that record that we did, it was called Feel Nothing, I think, and I think it was one of their first times working with a songwriter, and I just brought them in, and I was like, maybe we could get a little bit more of a chorus if you're open to like this. And it was literally even just like melody ideas that the songwriter brought to it, and it just pushed him a little bit out of his comfort zone. But he was just the singer just kind of stuck to his guns in terms of like, I won't do anything that I'm not comfortable with. But it definitely was a melody that he wouldn't have come up with on his own. And yeah, I love the result of that.
Yeah, the rock genre is very protective of things, or can be. I think,
yeah.
And I think that's more common in like the more entry level artists getting into this. They don't realize how unsacred you need to be to write a truly great song. Like you need to be able to discern what is really important and be willing to literally just chop the rest if you need to and start over.
Yeah, I think somewhere along the line there was this like, and this is probably antiquated, because it's a very 90s thing, but somewhere along the line there developed this like kind of stigma around like not selling out and like, you can't sync your song with a commercial. I don't think anyone cares about that anymore, but like there used to be all these like unwritten rules of like, well, you don't have any integrity of a band if you don't do X, Y, and Z. But I don't really know where that came from. It felt like it came from not the bands themselves, because like I mean I was watching like this like behind the scenes of like Nevermind, the Nirvana one, and it was just like Butch Vig being like, oh my god, Kurt Cobain wanted to like, he was like idolizing John Lennon, like he wanted to write the most like catchy stuff he possibly could, like he was writing pop music. But you have to, I hope that's not as much of a phobia for new bands anymore. I don't think it needs to be this like thing where it's polarizing like artistic integrity with like catchiness or accessibility, I guess. I don't think they're diametrically opposed anymore. Or never were.
No, they never were. You're right. It's like a weird thing, like as if it's easy to sell out and become like if I just sell out, I'll become famous. It's like, what? Oh, like, what are you going to do? What do those steps look like? That's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the selling out thing is an interesting one too. Another, kind of example of that was the Black Keys when I think it was like a Coca-Cola commercial or something they had an offer from, and they didn't take it because they thought that their fans would think that they were trash and that they sold out. And then I just was reading an interview with Dan Auerbach, and he said that if they had the chance now, that like, if they knew what they knew now, of course they would take that, because that's the thing. There's this weird stigma between selling out and using writers for a lot of, like we've been talking about, for a lot of rock bands. And I don't understand where that stems from or who created that. It's like you need to be a real artist, you need to write all your own stuff. And I don't get that. I don't know where it comes from. And I think it can be really hurtful for your career too if you need someone to come in and write a melody. I mean,
yeah. Well, you know what it's like? It's like someone telling you like, hey, you don't need like, you're a sellout if you use a therapist. You should deal with your own problems and like,
totally.
figure everything out on your own. Like, or you're not real enough. Like a good writer should feel like a therapist. And that's some of the best sessions I've been in. Like artists will break down in tears because they're like touching on something real that they were maybe even a little bit insecure about diving into on their own. Like, and it's not about like, oh, how well does that word rhyme or whatever. Like, I think a lot of people can make stuff rhyme and make melodies, sound good. I think getting to that core of things is stuff that a songwriter, like a good songwriters, are able to do. And it's effectively just them helping you be your best version of yourself. As cheesy as that sounds.
That's awesome. I feel like a songwriter is there to serve the artist and create the best version of themselves for that song. Where in like my kind of rock producer role, I'm there to serve the song and not necessarily the artist at that point. I'm like, all right, you've already created the song. Now I'm not afraid to hurt your feelings if it means the song's going to be the best it can be now.
Right. And I feel like a super valuable role is like engineer stuff too. And I still feel like that's one of my strongest kind of skill sets. Like, because I'm not a great player. Coming up as a drummer, I didn't learn a melodic instrument until I started writing songs. Like, and I'm just fumbling my way around keys, barely knowing how to play guitar. But coming up in like in the box laptop music SoundCloud era, I can like kind of manipulate sounds and like engineer stuff, which I'm sure is a big part of what you do producing rock bands too, like getting the best tones and balancing everything so well, especially if you're mixing them too. Like,
definitely,
that's a huge part of like just having records feel great and translate.
Right. But I feel like we would all agree that the song is by far the most important thing, right? Like it matters way more than how shiny we can make it, right? But that's interesting because I get hired all the time to make things shiny and nobody's investing in that songwriter. So like there's a disconnect there for bands where it's like, if we just go and get the song that we made to be shiny, everybody's going to love it. But then it doesn't and doesn't do so well. So maybe there is like, we need to draw attention to, maybe if that's not working, if the shiny version of your idea of a good song isn't getting there, maybe experiment with this other option of investing in the songwriter and seeing where that gets you. Because I've heard some like pretty crappy recordings of songs that I love.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I feel like that's really common, right? If the song's really great, you'll overlook the production or how, if the snare is a little too muddy or something, like you don't give a shit about that if it's a great song. But on the contrary, it's very difficult on the other side of that coin, right? If it's not that great of a song, but the snare's perfect, you're not going to listen to it.
Yeah.
That's not the important part of it, right?
Yeah, such a good point. I feel like we're very much past the kind of, Max Martin era of like stuff needs to be like good stuff sounds this bright and clean and awesome. Like I think even in pop music, it's like some of the most bold ideas are the ones that are winning now. Like it's not about there being this like objective standard that you have to try to strive for and your song's just better the closer you get to it. It's very much the opposite, where if you just do something that people haven't heard before and sounds good to them and is interesting, you're much more likely to stand apart and like get somewhere.
Definitely. Pop's probably the most bold, I think, right now, ironically. Like their use of like distortion all over the place and like different new drum sounds, changing. Like we listen to literally real kicks and snares for just decades and decades, and and now it's changing and it's so cool. I love that stuff. It's definitely influencing other like rock genres as well. I've been putting substance into stuff for years now because of pop.
Yeah, that's such a cool blend. And like we were talking about, I think before or maybe I said it on the podcast, I can't remember, but it's blending. Like pop's, if you're in a rock band right now, pop is coming for you. Like pop punk is back in a big way, and you can come at it from both angles, from like starting as a rock band and including more pop techniques, or starting as a pop band and going for way more live instruments. I have just random like, what I would consider very poppy artists, and we have songs that I would do like some distorted guitar, like chuggy stuff, like very kind of pop punk moves and have like trap drums. And a year ago, like that would be great. And now they're coming to me and being like, can we put live drums on this? Like,
cool.
They're going full tilt. Like they don't even want it to sound, pop, quote unquote, anymore. It's cool to me. It feels like I'm really old, and it feels like I'm actually seeing that cyclical thing you hear about, like trends coming back around like 20 years or whatever.
Yeah.
It's happening
but also,
to me.
As a drummer, though, it's also nice, like, I mean, I love electronic and I love producing electronic stuff, but hearing a real snare or like a real performance, it's like, feels good,
Yeah, bro.
We're still there.
I don't know if I'm like in this weird bubble of the rock producer world. Like if like the island in Canada is just a small bubble, but I've only done like 3, maybe 4 songs in my entire career that I've had programmed drums and no live drums.
Wow.
It's like I almost am always working with live drums. So it's just like the pop world is like, wait, you don't even have a drummer come in? How does that work? It's crazy.
That's so dope. I've started just layering. Like I have a pretty small room that I'm in right now, but I bought like listeners won't see, but I just bought like a little snare, hi-hat, and cymbal, and I'll just layer those on top. of
so cool.
program drums. So I get kind of like a hybrid because I find like you can get a lot of feel out of how you play the hi-hat and any kind of ghost notes in the snare and stuff. Like if you can trick people, but because like I don't want to spend all my time, trying to get my live kick to sound subby enough when I could just plop a sample in and it would be
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I use samples too, but
Yeah.
I'm always starting with that foundation for sure.
Yeah, the hi-hats are this kind of production thing, but the hi-hats are always so difficult too. I find like if you're trying to make program real hi-hats, very difficult to get a good feel.
It's the worst.
And when you can just go throw up a mic and if you can play it, I mean, that's great, right? So, but yeah, way easier.
This is like probably the third podcast in a row, but because we were talking about pop punk, we just got to quickly shout out that new Machine Gun Kelly is awesome. And
you like it?
Oh man, Marcus and I are both obsessed with it, and I'm trying to manifest that we're somehow going to get somebody from that team on the podcast one day.
I haven't even looked at who's working on it.
I mean, it's a pretty crazy crew. Like Travis Barker was super involved in the production, writing, and drumming.
Honestly, he's the top guy for bringing this sound back and like legitimizing it.
Yeah.
And what's crazy? I was just watching a video on this. What's crazy is I feel like what actually is going to bring pop punk back is being mixed with celebrity culture again. Like, because I think people forget that, like, I don't know, like what is, Fall Out Boy dude was dating Paris Hilton, and like, as lame as that is to talk about, and as little as I care about that whole celebrity culture thing, that's what can kind of catapult stuff to like actual mainstream when you have actual. And I think Machine Gun Kelly had a quote. He was kind of he got dragged a bit for saying this, but he's like, there's no like rock stars anymore. Like if you have those personalities emerge from that genre, it doesn't even matter that it's pop punk. It's not those sounds particularly, but like, cause everyone will like pop punk always somewhat, you know what I mean? Like, but to have celebrity culture kind of like start to emerge from that too. And they're dating famous TikTokers and there's drama behind it, songs and stuff. Like that's what's actually going to make it super mainstream. As lame as it is to say, I hate to talk like that.
No, you're right though. It draws attention to it in a big way, and it just kind of becomes popular slowly but surely again. You're right. I can't even remember what podcast it was, but they were talking about how rap stars are the new rock stars, right? Where like back when it was like Motley Crue and stuff, it was like a bunch of guys in spandex and long hair being assholes and getting on the news by just being how crazy stupid they were. And now it's like rappers going around doing stupid shit, but like just bigger than life personalities, right?
Fully. And like Trippie Redd's doing pop punk records on his album. Like,
yeah.
And oh my God. Oh, have you heard? I got my mind blown by this new artist, Gene Dawson, a couple weeks ago. Have you guys heard of him?
No, I'll read it now.
Please check out Gene Dawson. He's like, he just feels so fresh. Like it is the coolest blend of, it's definitely not like, oh, he's doing pop punk at all. He's like some in-between hybrid that I haven't heard in this exact way of like all this 90s kind of melodic influence, but like he's kind of like a rapper on top, but he sings, but it's got, punk tempos. It's crazy. I love it so much.
Like Slow Ties kind of do the same thing too, right?
Yeah. He's great.
Like it's fucking awesome. I don't know what the festival was, but I watched like a live performance of one of his songs from there, and he's in his underwear just like raging, and it's fucking awesome,
dude.
It's so cool to see.
So
man.
good.
Like,
have you seen the Jimmy Fallon thing he posted on his Instagram?
Yeah.
So that's a rock star move.
It's 100%. Yeah, and it's and Miramassa's stuff too, right? Like he fully started incorporating that. Like I don't even know what you call it, but it's like UK grunge almost, like pop. It's like it's such an interesting sound. And I just never expected that because, his stuff was always kind of like strange electronic, kind of eclectic electronic production, right? And he fully went like, I don't even know what you call it. It's like punk, but fucking cool. And it's like, they're new rock stars, man. It's awesome. I love it.
We should circle us back to some Stint related stuff because
whatever.
I'm loving this for sure, but I've got more questions for you and we don't want to keep you too long. So I'm getting this idea of what your relationship looks like with an artist. Maybe we should talk about, like you said, the publishing is kind of your focus when you're, like, as far as like a revenue generating move for doing what you do. So do you have like kind of some like contracts that you go through with an artist before you work with them, or when they take one of your songs, or is that something your management totally handles?
I mean, yeah, definitely let my management handle it all, but it's definitely very taboo to get into anything when you're songwriting with someone before the fact. Everything's kind of, in that sense, on spec that I do when I'm songwriting. Like, you get in the room with people, you just make something, and then there's a lot of steps between that and actually getting a deal done and the song coming out. The only times that there would be paperwork done beforehand, I think, are closer to what you were describing, your usual business setup. When someone comes to me and is like, this song's fully written, either we don't like the production that was done and we want it redone, or this is just a kind of piano or basic demo. Can you produce it out? And then even in those cases, it's pretty rare that I'll actually get a guaranteed full fee. We'll usually do a kill fee situation, because I actually don't even ethically feel great about being like, all right, take what I do and like it or lump it, you're paying me my full rate. That just feels kind of like a dick move. So usually, you work a kill fee out, which is, a percentage of what the full fee would have been if they had taken it. So that just kind of really is designed to protect my time, so that if I put a day or two into production, send something and they hate it, then I'm not out all my money for it. Like, I haven't completely wasted my time. Like, it's a bummer for everyone, but it just allows me to keep a roof over my head.
So if it's kind of on spec, how are you working out your songwriting percentages and the splits of who owns what?
Well, what I would recommend everyone do, because it gets weird whenever you don't do this, is you literally just divvy it up with the bodies in the room. And it makes stuff much easier when you all are just kind of like, okay, this is the crew. We're not going to add anyone else after the fact. Songwriter, producer, artist, sometimes another songwriter in there. So 4 bodies, 25% each. It's just simple. When stuff gets more complicated, it's usually more to do with like you pulling an idea from somewhere else that sparks something in that room, and you still keep an element of it. For example, like, I had a song that I started with this songwriter friend of mine, and we just kind of made it together, just the two of us, as like a pitch record or just for fun. And I really liked the beat, and the song was dope too. But I knew the beat was like really good for this one artist, Mo, that I work a lot with. And I played her the beat, and she's like, this is amazing. Great. So her and I write a song together over top this with another writer too. And so if I had just done a 3-way split, that would be kind of ignoring how the beat came about with this other artist or with this other writer. So in that case, in an effort even to kind of keep, well, you could go about it 2 ways. I could either just try to be like, okay, can we break a bit off of all of our percentages evenly for this girl? Usually in that scenario, I would feel guilty if I didn't tell anyone that it came about with someone else, and I sprung that on them last minute. And if I feel really guilty about that, or I don't feel like I was acting fairly, then I'll just be like, okay, I'll take it all out of my half. So if we'd split it 33, my share would dilute to break in this other writer for like 10% or something, but it wouldn't touch theirs. So those are the 2 kind of ways I would go about it.
I really love how it's like art first, like don't let any of this stuff get in the way of what we're making. And then there's just like this very assumed, it seems like anyways from this conversation, that it's this very assumed trust that you're gonna be looked after and nobody's gonna screw somebody else. Because I'm assuming that if you did cut somebody out for some reason, you'd probably never get work again, right? Like, word would spread very quick.
I mean, broad generalization, but because I've obviously heard stories. Everyone has horror stories of people being overly aggressive or just operating in a really kind of nightmarish way. Usually, like, I would say like 90% of the time, those people are not at the top of the industry or anything. I always hear those stories about people that are kind of struggling or developing or like not really killing it, so to speak. You know what I mean? So don't be like those people, because you're just being a dick and you're shooting yourself in the foot. And people that are wildly successful are not doing that. So you don't need to do that to be wildly successful. Obviously, protect yourself. Don't get taken advantage of. And I have a whole team, like my management. I have a publisher. I have a lawyer. All these people to protect me from getting screwed. But a lot of people will operate with just one of those who can virtually do everything needed to keep you from getting screwed. So even if you just have one, or just someone looking out for you. I really, it takes a special person, I think, to be able to be fully creative and be your entire, business management too. It's a lot of, to me, feels like a lot of uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if I was ever in a position where I was taking points, I would be looking to outsource that conversation somewhere else.
It just helps. It just keeps the relationship with the artist intact too, which is, I think, the most important thing. Like, I never want to, it's kind of this unspoken rule too. Like, I'll have artist friends that I'm so close with that I know at points our teams have gotten into like heated matches, but we've both just kind of been like, well, that's what they're for. Like, good, let them do it. Like, they're both looking out for our best interests, and they literally are there so that we don't have to do that. Like, that's what we're paying them for.
Yeah, you definitely need that buffer between you and like collaborators for sure. It becomes very difficult to stay creative with people like that if you're beefing with them about percentages or pay.
It can break relationships completely. It sucks. I've seen it happen.
Question just popped into my head. Are you involved in the pitching at all of a song, or are you just on the creation side of things and then it goes out into his channels after you?
So my publisher would love it if I was more into it. She does a lot of the heavy lifting in those cases, and I think I have been in certain times. But I think a lot of people doing what I do, or even especially songwriting, will see a ton of success if they are a bit more of a hustler of their own stuff. Because if I have relationship, and this is the an example of when it has worked for me, kind of taking the lead. If I have a trusted relationship with this artist, with artist X, Y, or Z, that goes a few years back, me telling them, hey, I think this song is great for you. You should check it out, see what you think, see if you'd be into cutting it. That sounds a lot better than if it came from some random email through a publisher to their A&R, from someone they haven't heard of before. It's still all about personal connections and networking. And the only reason I don't do a lot of that is I'm very modest. I don't feel like I'm pushing people. And I honestly just am not sitting on a ton of pitch records that I think are phenomenal, because I haven't taken the time in my career to really hone that craft and work on them and get them going. I'm much more, comfortable and likely to push beats on people, or at least like chords, or even just like a tempo. Like, what about a tempo like this? Like, I can do that a lot more comfortably than I can like, this song is perfect for you. We wrote it.
Cool.
Like, it feels, I don't have a lot of those.
Do you see a point in your career where you'll maybe start to get into pitch records more, or is that just not you?
my publisher is like, if you want to hit, you got to do pitch records. And I'm like, fuck you, but my biggest song to date is a pitch record, so I can't really argue with her. I think the best scenario in that case for me is finding a real good relationship with a writer that I just feel like we can really kind of sit down and explore and push ourselves, like honestly, like treating them like they are the artist. A lot of the best pitch records these days are from those like artist type songwriters that are either already broken off in their own career, but like, Sia was like the first big one of those. Like, everyone wanted a Sia record because Sia sounded so fucking good singing a Sia record. And if someone took a Sia record, like Rihanna Diamonds or whatever, they just try to sound like Sia, because it's just like it's just undeniably so good. And I have a writer friend that Sarah Aarons that has that quality. She's like phenomenal, and everyone that hears her stuff just wants to cut it. When we've had a few songs cut that were pitch records, but yeah, I think I do need to force myself to get into that more. But man, it's constant struggle. I don't know.
Does say you write a song and some big name does take it, like a pitch song that you've written, what does that look like? What does their ownership stake in the song become versus yours once a pitch song is taken?
Sometimes they'll ask for a bit of writing if they do change, especially lyrics, but maybe even a bit of melody here and there. Sometimes there's a thing where they like to just have a stake of writing just so it says on the credits, because you don't see the percentages in the public credits listings or whatever. You just see who's a writer on the song. So sometimes they just like to do that to kind of have the illusion that like, oh yeah, no, I was involved in the creation of this or whatever. Right. But I mean, just thinking about the Demi Lovato one I had like a few years back, that's that biggest pitch record I've had. That was just me, another producer and a writer, and she didn't take any but Demi didn't take any publishing. That was just straight up, they cut it and we keep it 33, 33, 33.
Are they recutting the song and owning the masters then?
Well, I mean, the label owns the masters in the same way that if it was just an artist or a pitch record, yeah, like they do a deal, the label pays me a fee, and then the masters theirs, I guess. And then, you know, there's a royalty point system broken off, like I'm sure you guys do. But no, I mean, that's another reason publishing is just so valuable, is it kind of just, once the song's written, that's yours.
It's protected.
Like, no one can really take that away from you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that brought up one last question on my side anyways. What about ghostwriting? Is that anything you've had to do?
As a producer? Actually, I did. Holy shit.
That's probably like never been said on the podcast before, ghostwriting. So for people that don't know what we're talking about, that's when you create something and then pretend you didn't. Somebody else takes credit for it.
Yes. Songwriting, I don't hear about that a lot anymore in songwriting. I think it was way more common in production, especially, again, when I was coming up in EDM world. Like Diplo was famous for it. It's like Diplo would be having songs out every like couple months that were like phenomenal sounding bangers, like in all these different subgenres, and it would be like produced by Diplo, and then like no, it was not produced by Diplo. I did it for like a trance guy. This was like the first year I was down in LA, and I think it was through old connections through that electronic duo band I had, and somehow we got connected, and he flew me out to Miami, and then, you know, we just wrote for like a week, and I just, you know, made drops or whatever for him, and then they came out, and I had to sign like an NDA and be like, nope, I didn't do that, and they just pay me a fee. And the thing is, like, EDM records never made any publishing money anyway, because they were literally just fodder for these guys to go out and tour, and they would make all their bank on like festival dates and big shows and stuff. So at the time I would take whatever I could get, like anything that would pay me. I was like, yes, I'll do it. But yeah, I ghosted for, and there was another DJ too. Holy shit, I forgot all about it. Yeah, it was this like female DJ. I think I would still be listed in the credits as a writer, but, you know, coming out as a female DJ, you know, everyone just kind of assumed like, oh, if you're DJing, that's what you do. And to her credit, we would kind of be in there together, but she didn't know how to produce at all. It was kind of more like she was like a live act. She was like, I need my own original material. So I would be there kind of like doing the production, but she would kind of be barking like, oh, okay, no, it needs to, what about this? Or put a sound like this in. So, you know, I think those are the two main cases I can think of, but I don't do it regularly anymore. I
was curious if it was like something that happened much down there, but it definitely, like, I never hear about it up here. The closest thing is I've done some ghost guitar and bass work for people. Just been like, hey, can you just actually, that's a term that Marcus and I know from our last producer, Eric Ratz. The Midnight Express team is the band that comes into the studio afterwards to redo the tracks. And I've been that guy on a record or two.
But do you get paid for that?
I get paid a fee. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So
that's
like,
funny.
Yeah, just here's the tracks, recreate them in a better way.
Oh my God, too funny.
It's really funny because that was what the first day in the studio with Eric asked you to do a record. We cut a drum track, and then that's what they were saying that in the studio. They're like, well, you're lucky we don't have to call the Midnight Express team. And I had no idea what that meant. And I was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you know, like if it sucks, we just delete it and get someone else to do it at midnight. And I was like, what you guys actually do that? Like,
it got to the point, like they said it so many times that I like memorized a little like scrape noise I had in my guitar track so I could like check it. at the end.
Oh my God, you're putting like watermarks in your own playing. That's
because I was like, they're making this joke so often that this would really suck if they were actually going to just like farm us out.
I can't decide. Would you rather that? So I remember hearing about, so like one of my favorite producers growing up was Ross Robinson, and he did all like the new metal records and stuff, and he did Glassjaw. And I remember this story of like Worship and Tribute, their second album with him. Their drummer in their band was just like deemed not good enough by Ross Robinson to play on the album, so he brought in Shannon Larkin, who's this phenomenal drummer from the LA scene. He plays in like Godsmack now or something crazy, but he just came, but he just got barreled over. He was just like, no, you're not drumming on your record, screw it, you can't do it well enough, we're bringing in this heavy hitter. Would you rather that, or would you rather not know?
I'd rather not know for sure, because I don't want to know. If you're gonna delete my stuff, just don't tell me. Don't break my heart like that. I feel like I'd be shattered.
Yeah, that's tricky, because I've had that conversation with bands where it's like, hey, I've listened to the demo, I've come to your jam space, like we're not going to be able to make the record you want unless we get a session drummer, because like you can't get a good result without a certain level of skill, no matter how much I edit and replace and like whatever. Like, so I just have gone with the upfront approach, because it's not like I can program the drums after the fact and they won't notice.
Yeah, they won't notice. Yeah, you can't really sneak it by.
Yeah, I sometimes I've had to be upfront. It totally sucks. And honestly,
it's gotta be a hard conversation.
Yeah, there's been like a couple times where they have not worked with me when I've told them like that's like the only way I'm willing to do it. It's like, okay, this is gonna suck no matter what. Like, so either I am upfront and they decide, okay, we're fine with it, or we're gonna practice much longer before we go in, which is totally great. That's the best scenario. Or they say yes. But like otherwise, it's me going into the studio and us not being able to get through the drum day, right? Because they can't even, they just can't do it.
See, that's kind of interesting too, because I feel like it plays into your integrity as a producer too, because you're kind of, it has to, in some level, come from like a place of, I want this record for you guys to be of a certain quality. And I don't feel like you're going to be able to hit that without me doing this.
Especially with, again, I'm not getting publishing or anything, but I am charging a fee. So for me to feel like I'm earning that fee, everything has to sound awesome, right? And so I don't feel like I'm getting my money worth if I'm just going in knowing that it's going to suck and not work.
That's great. I mean, I think it's good. I feel like people should have standards. You shouldn't just be like, I feel like that'll hurt your career and brand in the long run if people are like, oh, he'll just take anything and like
totally
doesn't care what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, that's interesting little crossovers of how our different worlds work. I'm loving this conversation, but we should absolutely let you go, because I know you've got to do another meeting fairly soon here.
It's fun though. We should do it more. Invite me back whenever.
Please, yeah, anytime, man. We're so stoked you reached out. Thank you so much for coming on. That was a great conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that comes up from feedback you guys get of stuff I could talk about to help. I feel like I ranted a lot about myself, but I feel like
that's what we wanted.
I feel this connection to Victoria still. I love it. My family's still there. I go back in pre-pandemic times. I would go back at least twice a year. So any way I can kind of help out people. We didn't even talk about immigration stuff. That's been a whole saga for me too. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I'm around.
We will have to touch on that for sure. This one of our longer episodes so far, actually, possibly our longest, and I'm stoked on that. Our editor is going to be confused at first, but he's interested in becoming a songwriter, so Chris is going to be stoked on this episode.
Oh, cool.
I mean, he is a songwriter, but I'm sure he's going to just totally eat up what you're doing and really learn a lot from it. So yeah, again, thank you, Jay, for coming on. Really, really appreciate all of your time.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It's fun. Love what you guys are doing.
We'll touch base. I'll keep you posted when this is going live and send you all the relevant assets and stuff.
Awesome. All right. Stay safe, guys.
Yeah, for sure. You too, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
All right. Hopefully you all enjoyed that conversation with Stint. I learned so much in that. I want to change how I do business. I don't know. I am fascinated with the idea of getting in the same room as the band and trying to write a song from scratch and like do a demo then and there and then go cut it. Like that's such a cool way to make a record, I think.
Oh man. That's the way that I like to write now. And since like starting to do that with electronic stuff, and the way that like, like collaborating with people in a room and coming up with something is so much more interesting to me now than I think I never would have considered it, when I was like, let's jam, dude. But I don't know. I love just, it's so fun to write with other people too. And you know, you really just expand your horizons and learn so much. And working with a writer, man, for rock bands, why not give it a shot?
Mm-hmm. And
no one does that.
We talk about on this podcast a lot about what you're like figuring out what your goal actually is. So like back on the 5 steps to a successful single release episode, which was ages ago. It was a long time ago. In the summer or something. But anyways, good episode. You check it out. And we do have a PDF guide for that. If you want the 5-step to a single release PDF guide, just DM us on Instagram. I'll send it to you. But pretty much the big takeaway is like, you have to figure out what success means to you. What are you aiming for? And I think a lot of musicians actually want to be songwriters. That's what they're most in love with is making music, right?
Totally.
So do you care if the song you're writing is something you're playing and your band is touring? Like, does it matter to you if you're making that song for yourself or if you're making it and somebody else is going to take it to the next step? Like, maybe that would fulfill what you want to be doing.
Well, and the other thing is a lot of people, when they get on the road, they realize they don't like the road. And I'm not saying that that's for, you know, that's obviously not everybody. There's some people who love being on tour.
Definitely.
But yeah, you don't really know until you do it. And so that's the thing, right? You might have this idea in your head of what your band and success will look like, which is you writing songs, cutting records, and touring all the time. But you come to find out that actually you just want to write songs, cut records, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, totally worth considering. That's the Zach kind of soul searching you should be doing if this resonated with you. For me, it's not like a good live show is what I was most addicted to, for sure. That was like, that fulfilled what I wanted is whenever we had a packed room to play to, kind of thing. So I don't know if I would be wanting to go down the songwriter and investing my time into that kind of thing personally, but like that, you just got to think about it yourself, I think. So hopefully this helps some people kind of hone in on what they're trying to do. Let's do a shout out for our Patreon subscribers. If you enjoy this podcast, please do become a Patreon member. It helps us a lot. And it lets us get sick guests like this. We don't pay our guests, by the way. I just realized as I said that wording kind of seemed weird. But this podcast does actually cost probably more money than you think to produce because we do a damn good job of it. And we have a great editor, Chris Erickson, and all this other stuff. So please support us, become a Patreon member. And there's some dope perks on there. I also want to say, a lot of our listeners work with me. They'll get me to like mix their songs or master their stuff or whatever, or even record with me. And that's wicked. I don't think they're aware that if they became a Patreon member, they would save money because there's like, that's one of the perks is you get money off working with me. So like, I can't wrap my head around it. I'm like, okay, this would cost you less if you just subscribed. Like, so if you're listening to this and you work with me, become a Patreon member, you'll get a discount. It's that simple. Okay. We got Evan Miller from the Wild Romantics, great artist who has been getting some work through podcast listeners. So that's really cool to hear. Chris Erickson, artist Scove, he's got some new stuff I just mastered for him. Super stoked. And he's also our podcast editor. And he's a great songwriter. So if you want to link up with somebody for songwriting, consider Chris. Bernard from the Enrons. Ryan from Venom and Spirit. That guy read every financial book I suggested to him. And it's awesome. He was like, give me some books. I gave him like 4 and he read them all in like a week. It's like, nice. You're a tank, man. That's wicked. Lucas from Vogue Villains. Graham from Carmana, who I'm now realizing I did not record a podcast clip for. Sorry, buddy. I was definitely due 3 days ago. Kevin from Supreme Remedy. Rob Wilkinson from Rob Elo. Tayfance and Carlin from Mulligan. I think we got everyone.
I think we got him.
Grady from Leather Apron Revival. Did I say Grady? All right. Well, they're in there now.
You did now, so.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate the support. And to all our new listeners, because our listeners count doubled in the last 2 weeks, which is freaking crazy. Wild. It's nice to meet you all. Please reach out to us on Instagram. If you're sharing this on Instagram, do tag Marcus and I and your band Sucks at Business. We appreciate it. Okay. We'll see you next week.